Rain tapped softly against the wide glass windows of the Blue Ridge Innovations Tower, casting ripples of light across the marble floors. The city of Asheville, with its charming streets and mountain skyline, stretched out beneath the 32nd floor like a postcard. But Charlotte McAdams, known across the Southeast as Charlie, the iron-willed CEO who turned a green tech startup into a $400 million empire, barely noticed the view. She sat motionless behind a sleek walnut desk, her wheelchair parked just slightly askew, her eyes fixed on the glow of her monitor. The cursor blinked in the middle of a half-written email. A bottle of pain medication sat uncapped beside her glass of untouched spring water. Her hair, always immaculately styled for interviews and board meetings, hung loose tonight, curling slightly from the mist in the air. Her high heels designer, unworn, sat in the corner like forgotten relics. It was nearly midnight. The office was empty. The silence pressed in. She shifted in her seat and winced. 6 months ago, she'd been hiking Black Balsam Knob, racing ahead of her assistant Melanie and grinning like a teenager. 10 minutes later, she lay crumpled at the bottom of a slope, unable to move her legs. The doctors had called it an incomplete T12 spinal injury. The specialists were optimistic in the beginning. Now they just used words like plateau and adjustment. Charlie knew what they meant. This is as good as it gets. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, but the words refused to come. Not for the investor update. Not for the press release. Not for the email she needed to send to the board, assuring them she was still in control. Because she wasn't. A soft knock broke the silence. She frowned. Everyone was gone. Even Melanie had left hours ago, after begging her to go home and rest. "You can't build an empire on 2 hours of sleep and pride, Charlie," she'd said, placing a homemade sandwich on the desk. Charlie hadn't touched it. The knock came again. "Come in," she called, her voice flat. The door opened slowly, revealing a man in janitor's blues, holding a mop and a bundle of rags under one arm. He looked surprised to find her still there. "I didn't mean to bother you, ma'am," he said, voice low and careful. "Wasn't expectin' anyone to still be workin'." Charlie stared at him for a second longer than necessary. He was young, maybe early 30s, with warm brown eyes and short, dark curls under a worn baseball cap. His name tag read Jesse. "You're fine," she said, turning back to her screen. "Just cleaning?" "Yes, ma'am. I usually do the executive floor last. Didn't want to startle you." She gave a tight nod, not looking up. Jesse hesitated. "You sure you're all right?" Charlie stiffened. "Why wouldn't I be?" He took a step into the room, then paused. "I saw you. Shift just now. Looked painful." She inhaled sharply, her fingers clenching. "I don't need a consultation. Didn't offer one." He said it without a trace of sarcasm. Just quiet observation. Then, almost apologetically, "I'm studying physical therapy during the day. Last year of school." That caught her attention. She looked up, eyes narrowing. "You're a janitor and a med student?" "Physical therapy," he clarified. "Veteran scholarship. Night shift pays the bills." He smiled gently. "Not as glamorous as it sounds." Charlie's gaze lingered on him. Something about his presence felt steadying, like a weighted blanket. She hated that it comforted her. "Well, I'm not your case study," she said, turning back to her screen. "No, ma'am." She expected him to leave, but he didn't. He stepped further in, glanced briefly at the bottles on her desk, then at the untouched sandwich, then back at her face. "How long since you've eaten?" She bristled. "Excuse me?" "I ask because exhaustion slows recovery. And posture-wise, you're sorry. Just shoulders are locked. Might mean you're compensating for nerve strain." Charlie stared at him. "You're very bold," she said. Jessie gave a half smile. "I've cleaned this floor for almost a year. First time I've ever seen the CEO past 10 p.m., and I've read enough textbooks to recognize fatigue and pain." She leaned back slowly in her chair. Her expression was unreadable. "You've read textbooks?" she echoed. But have you read my file? No, he said. But if you told me what the injury was, I might be able to give you some thoughts. Thoughts? She said, almost amused now. You want to offer me thoughts? Just insights. Not a diagnosis. I'd never do that without clearance. She said nothing. Finally, she murmured, incomplete T12 fracture. The fall crushed part of the spine. 6 months post. Limited function in both legs. Limited improvement since rehab plateaued. Happy? Jesse's brow furrowed. Plateaued? But incomplete T12s usually still have neural potential, especially at 6 months. Has your therapy been adjusted? Charlie gave a short, humorless laugh. I've seen every specialist in a 3-state radius. They all say the same thing. Work with what you've got. Learn to manage. He took another step forward. Managing isn't the same as healing. Now she was staring at him. And for the first time in weeks, her voice softened. Are you always like this? You walk into a room and try to fix what's broken. Jesse tilted his head. I think people aren't always broken. Sometimes they just stop believing they can get better. Silence fell again. Outside, the rain had stopped. Only the hum of fluorescent lights filled the space between them. Then Jesse said quietly, Miss McAdams, I believe you can walk again. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not the way you did before. But I believe it's possible. Charlie looked down, then away. You're a janitor, she said finally. And a student. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. And I'm a CEO, with 25 employees and a board full of men waiting to see me fall literally and figuratively. I know. So why are you standing in my office telling me you believe in something all the doctors gave up on? He didn't flinch. Because I've seen recovery where no one expected it. And because I have a daughter who asks me every night if I helped someone today. I'd like to say yes. Charlie felt her throat tighten. She hated how easily his words slipped past her walls. She looked at him for a long time, weighing, measuring. You don't even know me, she whispered. Not yet, Jesse said. A long pause. Then she exhaled and turned back to her screen. I'm working late again tomorrow. His lips twitched. I usually mop the floors around 11. She didn't look at him, but her voice was almost imperceptibly softer. Bring coffee. He grinned. Yes, ma'am. And with that, Jesse Rivera left the office, leaving behind nothing but the scent of rain, a cooling sandwich, and the first crack of light in a woman's fortress of pain. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The next morning came too fast. Charlie sat in her kitchen, untouched toast on her plate, her fingers absently stirring a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Her penthouse overlooked the misty ridgelines of Asheville's Blue Ridge Mountains, but the view didn't calm her. It only reminded her of what she used to do, how she used to feel. There was a time when sunrise meant trail runs, strategy calls, and power breakfasts with investors. Now it meant checking how many emails had piled up overnight while her legs reminded her of everything she couldn't do anymore. She took a breath and stared at her reflection in the microwave door. You don't need anyone, she whispered. You never have. But her voice lacked conviction. Jesse's words from the night before echoed louder than her own. I believe it's possible. No one had said that in months. Not her doctors, not her colleagues, not even Melanie, who had stood by her through board shakeups and the physical collapse that followed. That janitor student, whatever he was. He'd looked her in the eye like she wasn't broken, and she hated how badly she wanted to believe him. Her phone buzzed. A calendar alert. Quarterly earnings prep. 10 a.m. She closed her eyes, gathered herself, and wheeled toward the door. At 10:03 a.m., the conference room was already buzzing when Charlie rolled in. The noise dipped instantly, replaced by the forced professionalism of overcompensation. It was subtle, but she noticed the glances. Brent Caldwell, board member and investor since Series A, gave her a tight smile. Charlotte, glad you're feeling strong enough to join us in person. She didn't rise to it. It's McAdams in the office, Brent, and I've never missed a Q1 review. He gestured toward her seat at the head of the table, then added with just enough volume to be heard. We were just discussing potential leadership contingency plans, in case certain demands become too great. Melanie, seated to her right, shot Brent a sharp look. Charlie set down her tablet, steepled her fingers, and smiled coldly. That's funny. I was going to bring up contingency plans for board members who can't stop gossiping long enough to focus on actual numbers. A few stifled chuckles. Brent leaned back, face tight. She launched into the report, efficient, prepared, in control. But the second someone else started presenting, her gaze drifted to the rain-spattered windows, and she thought of Jesse Rivera. That night, the building was quiet again. A half-hour past 11. Charlie was in her office, eyes locked on the screen, pretending to work while internally debating whether what happened last night was real or foolish. She hadn't seen Jesse during the day, but a fresh bottle of water had appeared on her desk mid-afternoon. No note, just quietly placed, thoughtful, professional. Her phone buzzed. A message from Melanie. Don't stay too late. And for God's sake, eat the soup in the fridge. Charlie smirked. Melanie treated her like a cross between a daughter and a mildly infuriating celebrity. The elevator dinged softly down the hall. She heard the squeak of a cleaning cart. Then a knock. Come in, she called again, this time almost expectantly. Jesse stepped in, holding 2 paper cups. Didn't know how you take it, he said. So I brought one black, one with cream and sugar. Charlie blinked. You brought me coffee. He set them on the desk. You said to, I also bark at people and tell them not to talk to me, she said. You don't listen very well. Only when I know someone doesn't mean it. She raised an eyebrow. You're brave. He smiled. No, ma'am. Just observant. There was a pause. Charlie looked at the cup, then him. Why are you doing this? Because I think you want to walk again, Jesse said. But you've been told not to expect it. Her throat tightened. And I think, he continued, it's easier to accept being stuck than to risk being wrong about hope. His voice was quiet, but every word hit like a tremor. Charlie looked away. You don't know me. No, Jesse said, but I've seen that look. My wife used to get it after chemo. She hated feeling fragile. Charlie turned sharply. You're married? Widowed, he said gently. 3 years. Lena passed from ovarian cancer. I have a 6-year-old daughter, Lucia. The air shifted. I'm sorry, Charlie said, voice smaller. Thank you. She looked down at the cup, picked up the one with cream and sugar, took a slow sip. You were right. Jesse blinked. About? I've been compensating. Shoulders and neck are shot. I've had headaches all week. Still doing core activation. She scoffed. I was. But I stopped. It felt pointless. It's not, he said. Not if the signal's still there. She hesitated. You really think there's a chance? Jesse stepped closer, folding his arms loosely. I think your spine didn't give up. You just stopped hearing it. Charlie let that hang in the air. Then she exhaled. What would it even look like if I let you help? Early mornings, assessments first, build a baseline, then mobility, stretching, rewiring, the communication between brain and body. And what do you get out of it? He shrugged. I need field hours, and I care about cases that aren't textbook. She stared at him, trying to read something ego, savior complex, fantasy, but there was none of that. Just a quiet steadiness. Fine, she said finally. We try 1 session. He smiled. Tomorrow morning? 6 a.m. I'll bring a yoga mat. She tilted her head. You realize if anyone finds out about this, there will be rumors. I'm not here for office gossip, ma'am. Charlie looked away, covering the smallest smile. As he turned to leave, she called out, Jesse? He paused. I haven't trusted anyone with my body since the accident. He nodded slowly. Then let's earn it, he said. And he was gone again. Footsteps fading down the hall, leaving Charlie with warm coffee, a sense of nervous anticipation, and a promise she didn't know she needed to hear. Let's earn it. The office was still and dark when Jessie stepped off the elevator just before 6. The scent of lemon polish and recycled air lingered faintly in the hallway, mingling with the faint hum of early morning silence. Over his shoulder, he carried a rolled-up yoga mat, a resistance band, and a soft blue towel. In his hand, 2 paper cups. When he reached the executive suite, the door to Charlie's office was already cracked open. He knocked gently. Come in. Her voice called, more alert than he expected. She was at her desk, dressed in sleek black workout leggings, a zip-up hoodie, and her hair tied back in a low ponytail. No makeup, no heels, no armor. You're early, she said, glancing at the clock. I didn't want to be late for my first unofficial assignment, he said, offering her the coffee. Same as yesterday, cream and sugar. Thank you, she said, taking it and sipping. I had no idea you were so punctual. I have a daughter. She runs tighter schedules than most CEOs. Charlie gave a soft huff of amusement. Touché. He unrolled the yoga mat near the windows, where morning light began to spill in soft and golden. The city below was just waking up, trucks rumbling through the streets, windows flickering on in distant apartment towers. But up here, it felt like the world belonged to just the two of them. All right, Jessie said gently. Let's start simple. I just want to see how your body responds. Charlie wheeled over slowly, parking beside the mat. Do I need to lie down? If you're comfortable with it, I'll guide you. She hesitated, then nodded. Let's do it. He moved with calm precision, sliding one arm under hers, supporting her back as she shifted from the chair onto the mat. The process was slow, deliberate, and not without struggle. But he never flinched, never rushed. His voice was even, his hands steady. Once she was positioned, he knelt beside her. Okay, first, I'm going to apply light pressure to your feet. I want you to tell me where you feel it, and how strong it is. She gave a nod. Got it. He began the assessment, fingers pressing gently along pressure points, noting her reactions. Left heel, some pressure, not sharp. Right shin, nothing. She looked away quickly, jaw tight. Jessie didn't react. Okay. Let's try upper thighs. You doing all right? I'm fine. She wasn't. He could see it in the twitch of her jaw, the way her fingers curled slightly on the mat. Every answer, every silence, was a reminder of what she used to do without thought. Hiking, running, dancing in heels at company galas, all of it stolen in a moment. He adjusted her position slightly. Try to engage your left quad. Just think about it. Picture it tightening. She closed her eyes, lips parted. A full 30 seconds passed in silence. I don't think I... Wait, Jessie said, watching closely. Do that again. What? Whatever you just visualized, do it again. She concentrated, deeply, and then subtle, but real. He saw it, a flicker beneath the skin. You moved it, he said, voice low and stunned. Your quad, it responded. Charlie's eyes flew open. What? It was slight, but it was there. Her mouth parted. Are you sure? Positive. That's not placebo. That's real. She blinked, then looked away, blinking rapidly. Jessie sat back on his heels, giving her space. You've still got communication between the brain and muscle. It's weak, but it's there. Charlie looked up at the ceiling, swallowing hard. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, quietly, no one said that to me. Not since month 3. Well, Jessie said gently, I'm not everyone else. She turned her head toward him. her expression unreadable. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, but this time her voice wasn't defensive. It was soft, honest, vulnerable. "I told you, I believe in recovery, and because I know what it's like to lose something that feels permanent." She studied him. "You mean your wife?" Jesse nodded. "She was a teacher. Brightest person I ever met. When she got sick, everyone told us to hope, but no one told us how to live in the meantime." Charlie's voice was barely a whisper. "And after she passed? I tried to keep moving, for Lucia, for myself. But I didn't know how to rebuild, not until I realized. Healing isn't about going back. It's about going forward differently." She closed her eyes, breathing that in. "You ever think," she said slowly, "that maybe I built too much of my life around being untouchable?" Jesse's eyes softened. "You mean strong?" "No," she said, a bitter smile on her lips. "I mean untouchable. No family. No real friends. Just Melanie and a dozen people who depend on me to keep the lights on." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Maybe that version of you needed to exist to survive that world. But maybe the next version doesn't." Charlie let the silence stretch, her chest rising and falling with careful breaths. "You speak like a therapist already." Jesse smiled. "Maybe I've had enough broken parts in my life to know how they fit together." Her eyes lingered on him longer than before, and something shifted. Not dramatic, not obvious, but real, a kind of trust, a quiet offering. He helped her back into the chair with the same steady patience, guiding her gently, making sure she was settled before stepping back. "That was enough for day one," he said. "Don't want to overwhelm the system." She nodded slowly, but before he could turn to pack up, she spoke. "Jesse." He looked at her. "Tomorrow, can we go a little longer?" He smiled, the kind of smile that made her chest ache in a way she didn't recognize. "Yeah, we can." As he gathered the mat, the light outside grew stronger, turning the glass walls golden. For a moment, Charlie watched his reflection in the window. Steady, grounded, real, and for the first time since the accident, she felt like, maybe, just maybe, this version of her wasn't weaker, just different, and possibly stronger in ways she hadn't even begun to understand. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Sunlight spilled across the wood floor of the executive suite like warm silk, soft and golden, wrapping the room in quiet promise. It was barely 6:30, but Charlie was already at the window, sipping hot lemon water and staring down at the waking streets of Asheville. She heard the elevator doors open. Her pulse quickened more than she wanted to admit. A soft knock. "You're early," she called. Jesse stepped in, dressed in gray joggers and a fitted quarter-zip that made him look more trainer than janitor. The yoga mat slung over his shoulder, the duffel in his hand, and that same patient calm in his eyes. "I figured you might be," he said. Charlie didn't smile, but her expression softened. "You assume a lot." "Only the important things," he replied, setting the mat down and pulling out a clipboard. "Vitals first. How's your energy?" "Better. Didn't sleep much, but I feel clearer. I actually finished a whole bowl of oatmeal. That's a first in weeks." He looked pleased. "We're off to a good start." She arched a brow. "Don't get ahead of yourself, Rivera." He chuckled and moved toward her chair. "Shall we?" Their routine was smoother now, his movements practiced, hers more trusting. She let him guide her onto the mat without comment, her muscles less tense, her hands no longer clutching the sides of the wheelchair like a lifeline. He began the session with stretches, gentle adjustments, quiet instructions. But there was something different in the air today. Something charged. Her responses were quicker, her breathing more focused. When he asked her to visualize the movement of her left thigh, she didn't just try, she believed, and the muscle twitched with more intention. "I felt that," she gasped. "I saw it. Jessie said, eyes lighting up. You're building a pathway. Keep going. She did. Again and again, coaxing flickers of motion from muscles long dismissed by everyone else. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her hands trembled from the effort. But she kept pushing, until, finally, Jessie placed his hand gently on her knee. Let's pause, he said, voice low. You've done more in 2 days than some people do in 2 weeks. Charlie closed her eyes, heart pounding. I forgot what this felt like, she whispered. What? Progress. Hope. It's terrifying. Jessie sat beside her, their shoulders inches apart. I know, he said. Hope feels dangerous when you've had it ripped away. She looked at him, searching his face. Did you ever stop hoping? He was quiet for a moment. I almost did. After Lena passed, I thought I'd never be able to breathe again without guilt. I thought my daughter deserved someone stronger than what I'd become. His voice cracked, just slightly. But she looked at me one morning, her hair tangled, eyes puffy, and said, Daddy, are we still a family if Mummy's in heaven? And I told her yes. I said yes, even though I didn't know how. And that was the first time I chose hope again. Charlie swallowed, the lump in her throat thick and burning. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her, he said, smiling. Lucia saved me. In her own way. Charlie stared at the ceiling. I've spent most of my life thinking needing people made me weak. And now I don't know, she admitted. But I'm starting to think. Maybe independence isn't the only kind of strength. They sat in silence, the moment stretching wide and full between them. Then Jessie shifted slightly. You said the board is watching you. Charlie nodded, her voice dipping. They smell blood. Brent Caldwell, in particular. He's always seen me as too young, too ambitious, too female to deserve the position. Sounds exhausting. It is. Let me guess, Jessie said. He's already floated a succession plan. Last quarter, Melanie shut it down before it reached a vote. He looked at her. How much are you carrying alone? Charlie gave a short laugh. All of it. I'm guessing no one knows about these morning sessions. Not unless you count the cleaning crew and they think I'm meditating. Jessie looked at her seriously. You realize this has the potential to complicate things. You mean office gossip. I mean perception, rumors. I'm a janitor, technically. You're the CEO. We're in a glass office before dawn. It doesn't take much. She looked at him steadily. Are you worried? No. Then neither am I. His jaw flexed slightly, but he didn't argue. Charlie added, You've been more professional than any doctor I've paid 6 figures to. He gave a small smile. Thanks. That's probably the nicest thing anyone said to me at 6:45 inches the morning. There was another pause, heavier this time. She shifted on the mat, glancing toward the window. Do you ever think? Some people come into your life at the exact moment you need them most. Jessie tilted his head. Yeah, I do. Her eyes met his. They held, and just like that, the air changed again. Not in a loud way. In the quiet, aching way that happens when 2 people realize they've crossed some invisible line. And neither of them is reaching for the map back. He looked down. We should finish up. You've got a full day ahead. Charlie nodded, but didn't move. Then softly, Jessie? Yeah? If I asked you to stop these sessions, would you? He hesitated. If that's what you needed, and if it wasn't, then I'd show up every morning until you told me not to. Her voice dropped to a whisper. What if I don't know what I need? He looked at her for a long time, then quietly. Then we figure it out, one step at a time. And with that, he helped her back into the chair, slow, steady, with a gentleness that said more than words ever could. By the time Jessie left, the room still carried the echo of something unspoken, something tender, something dangerous. Charlie wheeled herself to the window, staring out at the city now buzzing to life. She pressed her fingertips to her leg, then closed her eyes. and for the first time in months, she didn't feel numb. The next few mornings blurred into a rhythm. Wake before dawn, brew coffee, stretch, breathe, and wait for Jesse. He always arrived exactly at 6:02, 2 cups in hand, one with cream and sugar. His steps were soft, his smile easy. But beneath it, Charlie could feel something else, simmering, quiet, purpose, steady warmth. He never pushed, but he never held back either. Their sessions grew more intense, more focused. Her body responded more each day, sometimes in small flickers, sometimes in jolts that left her breathless with hope. By the 5th morning, Charlie could feel tension in her lower back, something no doctor had expected to return. Jessie noticed it immediately and adjusted her stretches. "Your lumbar fascia's waking up," he said, gently pressing along her spine. "That's good. That means we're making progress." Charlie didn't answer right away. She was too focused on not crying. "Eventually," she said, "they told me I'd plateaued, that this was my new normal." Jessie didn't look up. "You're building a new normal." She gave a quiet laugh. "That should go on a bumper sticker. Or a TED Talk." They shared a look, a smile that lingered too long. Jessie looked away first. That morning, for the first time, he lingered after the session. "You have a big day ahead?" he asked, gathering his things slowly. Charlie nodded. "Board review meeting. Brent's pushing for a new sustainability partnership, one that benefits his brother's logistics firm." Jessie made a face. "Let me guess it's overpriced and inefficient, and borderline unethical." "Sounds like Brent." Charlie tilted her head. "You really don't like him." "I don't like people who use power as a weapon," Jessie said quietly. "Or who assume someone's worth based on what they've lost." That hit her harder than she expected. She watched him zip his duffel, pause at the door. "Jessie?" He turned. "What if I win today?" she asked. "What if I shut him down in front of everyone?" His brow furrowed. "You will. But what then? What happens when I start getting stronger? When I start walking again?" Jessie was quiet for a moment. "Then you'll have a new problem." "What's that?" "Deciding what kind of life you actually want now that you're no longer surviving." The silence that followed felt like a held breath between them. Charlie didn't speak. She couldn't. And then the door closed, and he was gone. The boardroom was 10 degrees too cold and 20% too tense. Charlie rolled in with quiet authority, wearing a navy blazer and slate-gray slacks. Her wheelchair gleamed beneath her, polished to perfection. Melanie sat to her left, phone in hand, ready for battle. Brent was already speaking, standing near the screen. "And if we diversify our logistics stream through Caldwell Freight, we'll increase supply chain reliability and secure favorable regional tax incentives." Charlie raised a hand. "Let's pause there." Brent blinked. "Something unclear?" "Yes," she said calmly. "Why you think this board is naive enough to approve a deal that funnels money into your brother's struggling company under the guise of sustainability?" A slow ripple moved through the room. Brent straightened. "With all due respect, Charlotte, I've done the math. The deal makes sense. And I've done the audit," she countered, sliding a folder across the table. "Your numbers don't match, and the route projections show a 30% increase in emissions compared to our current suppliers." He went pale. "I won't approve a deal that undermines our mission and our ethics," Charlie continued. "If anyone here has an objection, I welcome a motion for discussion." Silence. Even the executive legal counsel looked down at her tablet, pretending to scroll. Melanie gave Charlie the faintest nod. Brent, jaw clenched, sank back into his seat. Meeting adjourned. Later that afternoon, Melanie followed Charlie back to her office, closing the door behind them. "You were incredible in there," she said, setting her bag down. "Like full-on surgical strike, Charlie is back." Charlie exhaled slowly. "I don't know where it came from." "I do," Melanie said. "You're feeling strong again." Charlie turned to face her, brow furrowed. Mel, can I ask you something? Anything. If you were me, if you were recovering, rebuilding, and someone came into your life unexpectedly. Someone good. Someone surprising. Would you let it happen? Melanie blinked. You're talking about Jessie. Charlie didn't deny it. Her voice dropped. I don't know what this is, but it's becoming something. And I don't know if I'm ready for it. Melanie crossed the room and sat beside her. Charlie, you've spent your whole life controlling the uncontrollable. But healing isn't something you can schedule, and neither is love. Charlie's breath caught. Melanie reached out and touched her hand. He's been good for you. I see it. Everyone does. Charlie whispered. It's not just about me. He has a daughter, a life. Then talk to him. Figure it out. But don't shut it down just because it's unexpected. Charlie stared at the floor. Okay, she said finally. That night, she stayed later than usual, pretended to work, mostly watched the door. When Jessie didn't come for cleaning duty, she told herself she didn't care. But just as she started packing up, her phone buzzed. A text. Jessie. Had to switch shifts tonight. Lucia had a school recital. She played tambourine like a rock star. Rain check on coffee. Charlie stared at the message, smiling despite herself. She typed, deleted, typed again. Then finally sent, Tambourine rock stars deserve all the applause. Tomorrow. Same time. The reply came instantly. Jessie. Wouldn't miss it. Charlie set her phone down, heart pounding. Not from fear. From something else. Something tender. Something real. And for the first time, it didn't scare her. The next morning came with the hush of rain tapping against the office windows like a slow, steady heartbeat. Asheville was wrapped in a soft gray mist. The mountains barely outlines in the distance. As if the whole city had paused to take a breath. Charlie sat in the quiet glow of her office, her hands resting on the wheels of her chair. She'd arrived earlier than usual, the silence more comforting than any playlist or morning news segment. There was something about the stillness, about being in this space, before the world demanded things from her that had started to feel safe. And then came the sound she now knew by heart. The soft squeak of rubber soles, the rustle of nylon, and the knock. Come in. Jessie stepped inside, hair damp from the rain, hoodie clinging slightly to his shoulders. He looked like he belonged in this moment, in this space, in this part of her life, and that realization made something flutter in her chest, wild and unfamiliar. Brought the usual, he said, offering the cup. She took it with a soft smile. You're getting predictable. Dangerous territory, he said, settling the mat on the floor. We'll have to shake things up. Charlie wheeled closer. Shake away. He arched an eyebrow. Careful. I might take that literally. She laughed, genuine, unguarded, the kind of laugh she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. Their session began like the others, structured and steady, but today, Jessie introduced a new exercise, more advanced, more deliberate. We're going to try supported standing, he said. Just for a few seconds. Charlie stilled. That's fast. You're ready, he said gently. I'll be right here. No pressure. But I want you to feel your body upright again. She looked at the mat, the straps, the small, wheeled parallel bars he'd brought. Okay, she whispered. Let's try. The setup took time, adjusting straps, guiding her movements, making sure everything was secure. Jessie moved carefully, his voice soft but steady. Breathe through it. One shift at a time. Trust the support. Her heart raced as she felt the shift in gravity. Her core trembled, her palms pressed to the padded bars. And then she was upright. Not fully weight-bearing, not without help, but upright. Tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. Oh my God, she whispered. You're doing it. Jessie said quietly. "You're standing." She let out a shaky breath. "I thought I'd forgotten this feeling." Your body remembered. Her legs began to shake. Jessie moved behind her, hands steady on her back. "Okay, that's enough for today. Let's ease you down." Once she was back in the chair, her breath was ragged, but her eyes were bright. "Thank you," she said, voice thick. "You did the work," he replied. She looked at him, really looked rain, glistening on his collar, his hair curling slightly at the edges, his eyes fixed on her like she was something worth believing in. And just like that, the room felt too quiet, too full, too close. She spoke first. "What would you do if this, whatever's happening between us, starts to cross lines?" He met her gaze. "I'd name it. I'd be honest. I wouldn't let it go unspoken." Charlie inhaled deeply, heart pounding. "I'm not good at this," she admitted. "I don't know how to separate the way I depend on you in here from the way I think about you out there." Jessie's voice was low. "You're not the only one feeling that tension." She blinked. "I try to keep it professional," he said, "because this started with healing, and that still matters most. But Charlie, I notice things." "What things?" she whispered. "How your laugh changed in the last week, how you stopped flinching when I touched your wrist, how your eyes soften when I talk about my daughter." She looked down, throat tight. "I'm not asking for anything," Jessie continued. "I just don't want to pretend we don't feel this shift, whatever it is." Charlie swallowed. "What do we do with it?" "We take it slow. We honor your recovery. We stay honest." She nodded, barely. "Okay." A pause. Then she looked up. "Can I ask you something completely selfish? Anything. Will you stay for a few minutes? Sit with me. No exercises. No talking if you don't want to." Jessie nodded. "Of course." He sat cross-legged on the mat beside her chair, his presence grounding. The rain kept falling outside, rhythmic and steady. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Eventually, Charlie reached down barely, hesitantly, and her fingers brushed his. He didn't flinch. He turned his hand over and let their fingers rest together. Not gripping, not pushing, just touching. The room pulsed with quiet understanding, and in that silence, something shifted between them. Not an explosion, not a confession, but a connection, stronger than they dared admit. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something more. The next morning, sunlight filtered in through the tall windows like spilled gold. It warmed the room, casting soft shadows on the pale wood floor. Charlie sat in silence, a quiet ache resting beneath her ribs. She had arrived before Jessie again earlier than usual, her body awake with anticipation, her mind a swirl of questions she didn't yet know how to answer. Her fingers tapped the armrest of her chair as she stared at the rain-streaked skyline. Part of her wanted him to walk through the door and smile like always, to pick up right where they'd left off. The other part of her wasn't sure what to do with the memory of their hands touching in silence. When the knock finally came, her chest stilled. "Come in," she said softly. Jessie entered, more reserved than usual, but his eyes searched hers with that same quiet certainty. He set the coffee down without a word, unrolled the mat, then sat beside it cross-legged, looking up at her. "I wasn't sure if you wanted to do the usual today," he said. Charlie shook her head. "I don't want routine, not this morning." He gave a small nod. "All right, what do you need?" She looked at him for a long time. Then finally, "I want to talk about what's real." He hesitated. "You mean yesterday?" "I mean this." She gestured between them. "Whatever's happening." Jessie leaned back on his hands. "Okay." Charlie inhaled slowly. "I'm trying not to romanticize this, not to let the emotions of recovery confuse me. But the truth is, you matter to me, and it's starting to affect how I think, how I move through my day." Jessie's face was unreadable for a moment. But then his voice came, low and even. Charlie, you are not confusing therapy with attraction. You're not broken and clinging to the nearest life raft. You're not irrational. Her breath hitched. He leaned forward. You're just a woman who's finally allowing herself to feel again. The air between them thickened, like the pause before a storm. Charlie folded her hands tightly. What do we do with that? Because I still need you in that role. As my guide, my therapist, my coach. If we cross a line, I could lose that. You won't, Jesse said, his voice firm. I can be both. For now. I'll set the boundaries if you need me to. But I won't lie and say I don't feel this too. She looked at him, vulnerable, raw. How do you handle being so steady all the time? He let out a breath, almost a laugh. I'm not. You just don't see the mess under the surface. I'd like to, she said, surprising herself with her own honesty. If you'd let me. A beat passed, then another. Jesse reached down into his bag and pulled out something wrapped in a napkin. He unfolded it carefully and held it up, a small, crooked clay heart, childlike, painted with uneven strokes of pink and green. My daughter made this, he said. After her mom passed, she started making these little hearts. Said they were for people who were missing something. Charlie blinked. And you carry it with you? Everywhere. She reached out, gently brushing her finger against the edge. It's not perfect, he said, but it's strong, fired in heat, hardened by time. Charlie's voice trembled. So am I. Jesse looked at her, and something shifted in his expression, tenderness, pride, admiration, a mix that melted the room around them. You're not just surviving anymore, Charlie. You're rebuilding. She turned away for a moment, eyes glistening, the lump in her throat making it hard to speak. Do you ever wonder how your life ended up here, with me? He smiled. Every morning, and every time, the answer's the same. I was supposed to be here. A soft knock startled them both. Melanie's voice came through the door. Charlie? Sorry to interrupt. Brent's asking for you. Charlie's heart plummeted, yanked from the calm like a diver pulled from deep water. She cleared her throat. Tell him I'll be down in 10. They listened as Melanie's footsteps receded. Jessie stood slowly. You okay? Charlie nodded, though her expression was harder now. I have a feeling this won't be a casual check-in. You want me to wait? She hesitated, then shook her head. No. But if I ask for you later, will you come? Jessie bent slightly, meeting her eyes. Always. He left quietly, and Charlie wheeled to her desk, straightening her jacket, her spine tall. But the warmth of that morning, and the imprint of Jessie's presence, clung to her like a second skin. 10 minutes later, she entered the boardroom. Brent was standing at the head of the table, arms crossed, mouth tight. He turned as she entered. You're late. She didn't flinch. I said 10 minutes. She parked beside it. I'm fine here. Brent's lips thinned. We've been receiving reports about your morning routines. Charlie kept her gaze steady. From whom? Does it matter? He countered. Let's just say there are concerns about impropriety, about blurred lines. Charlie's jaw tightened. Are you suggesting something unethical? I'm suggesting the optics are questionable. A janitor given access to the executive suite for private sessions, daily, unsupervised. Her blood pulsed, but her voice remained cool. He's also a certified rehabilitation specialist, which I cleared with legal. Brent's smile was thin. You cleared it, quietly, without informing the board, and now people are talking. Let them talk. That's not how this works, Charlotte, he said, leaning forward. You're not just a woman in recovery. You're the face of this company, and if that face becomes a scandal, don't. She cut in sharply, her voice low, controlled. Don't twist this into something it's not. Brent straightened. We're watching. The board will vote next month on your annual leadership review. Tread carefully." Charlie stared at him. Calm. Fierce. Then, without another word, she turned and wheeled herself out of the room. Her hands shook only once at the elevator. She clenched her fists until the tremor stopped. Back in her office, she stared at her reflection in the glass. Not broken, not afraid, just bracing for a storm she now knew how to weather. And this time, she wasn't facing it alone. That night, Charlie couldn't sleep. The words Brent had thrown at her, scandal, optics, impropriety, looped endlessly in her mind, not because they held weight, but because of the power behind them. The way men like him wielded whispers like weapons. She sat in the dark, legs wrapped in a throw blanket, staring out at the misty lights of downtown Asheville. Cars passed below, slow and anonymous. Inside her penthouse suite, the only sound was the rhythmic hum of her oxygen diffuser. Her phone buzzed once. A text. "Jesse, just checking in. You okay?" She stared at the screen, thumbs hovering, then typed, "Brent cornered me today. Told me people were watching, that the board may use our sessions against me." There was a pause. Then, "Do you want me to stop coming?" Charlie's stomach dropped. She typed quickly, "No, that's not what I want. A beat, Jesse." "Then I'll be there. Same time. You don't need to explain anything to anyone. We're doing the work. That's all that matters." She read the message twice, and for the first time all day, she exhaled. The next morning, he was already waiting when she arrived. Rain slicked the windows again, but the room felt warm, familiar. She wheeled in silently, met his gaze. He gave her a nod, no questions, no pressure. They moved into the session like muscle memory. Stretches, core stabilization, supported balance drills. Then Jesse stood and reached for her hand. "Want to try something new?" he asked. Charlie narrowed her eyes. "Define new," he smiled. "A walking frame, parallel bars. I borrowed a lightweight set from a contact in physical therapy." Her eyes widened. "You brought bars?" "I brought hope," he said simply. She blinked hard. He walked over to a canvas bag and unzipped it, pulling out 2 sleek adjustable sidebars with a padded base platform. "We'll do it in stages. You'll be fully supported, and I'll be right beside you. But I think you're ready to take your first steps." She froze. Jesse came closer, knelt so they were at eye level. "Charlie," he said gently, "you've been sitting in this chair long enough to forget what progress feels like. Let me remind you." She looked at the frame, then back at him. "I'm scared." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." It took 15 minutes to get her strapped in and positioned. Jesse's hands were steady, guiding her legs into place, anchoring her arms along the side rails. Her body trembled from the effort. Her chest was tight. "I can't," she whispered. "Yes, you can," he said calmly. "We're not looking for strides. Just one shift, one lean. Let your body remember." She closed her eyes, focused on the soles of her feet, on the ghost of motion deep in her spine. Her left leg twitched. Then her right foot scraped half an inch forward. "Charlie." Jesse's voice was thick. "That's it. That's a step." Her eyes flew open. She looked down. Tears welled instantly. "I did that." She breathed. "You did. I didn't think I ever would again." Jesse stepped forward, gently unfastening her from the support harness, easing her back into the chair. Her hands shook as they rested on the armrests. Jesse crouched in front of her, face soft with pride. "You have no idea what you just did for yourself." She nodded, tears spilling freely now. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "Why are you doing this, Jesse?" He tilted his head. "Helping you?" "No," she said. "Caring, believing in me, when I didn't even believe in myself." Jesse sat down on the floor, legs crossed again like he always did. I know what it feels like to be forgotten, he said. To be reduced to a title or a diagnosis. I also know what it means to have one person see through all of it. You saw me when no one else did. I was just curious about a janitor who carried himself like a doctor. And you asked why, he said. Most people don't. She smiled through the tears. Then, more seriously, they're going to use this against me. Brent. The board. They're going to make it look like I crossed a line. Then let them try, Jesse said, voice low and steady. Because no matter what happens, you're healing, and that's bigger than whatever they're afraid of. Charlie leaned forward, elbows on her knees. I wish it was just about healing. What is it about? She hesitated. I think I'm falling for you. He didn't flinch. He didn't move. He just looked at her with those steady brown eyes. You think? I know, she whispered. I just didn't want to. He stood slowly and came closer, kneeling so they were face to face. I don't have money, he said, or a title, or anything that fits into your world. She smiled, sad and warm. Good, because I'm tired of people who fit. And then, gently, Jesse leaned in not to kiss her, but to rest his forehead against hers. A breath shared. A silent vow exchanged. Neither of them needed to say it. Whatever this was, it had already begun. The next few days passed in a soft, electric blur. Charlie's morning sessions with Jesse continued, but something had shifted between them. Something unspoken, yet undeniable. Every stretch, every adjustment, every pause between instructions now hummed with a quiet intensity neither dared name out loud. And yet they kept showing up. She walked, if only for seconds, if only in place 3 days in a row. Each time, a little stronger, a little steadier. Each time, Jesse caught her gaze with that same look of wonder, as if witnessing a miracle that only the two of them could truly understand. But outside the safety of those sessions, the world hadn't stopped spinning. In fact, it was starting to spin faster. Melanie caught her outside the boardroom after a strategy meeting on Thursday. She looked tense, her phone clutched tight in her palm. Charlie, she said under her breath, pulling her aside. We need to talk. Charlie blinked. What's going on? Brent's been making moves. I overheard him talking to Lyle from compliance, something about requesting surveillance logs. He's trying to paint a picture. A picture of what? Charlie asked, though she already knew. Melanie sighed. Of you and Jesse, that this has turned into something more than therapy. Charlie's throat tightened. That's not illegal. No, Melanie said, voice low. But it gives them ammunition. You know how this board works. The moment perception starts to outweigh policy, they'll act. Charlie exhaled slowly, her jaw clenched. Let them dig. There's nothing they'll find that isn't based in truth and integrity. Melanie hesitated. Is there something you need to tell me? Charlie met her eyes. Yes. I trust him. That's the only thing I need to say. Melanie gave a small nod. Then we'll be ready. That evening, Charlie didn't go home after work. Instead, she asked Jesse if he'd meet her outside the River Arts District, an old textile mill turned gallery space. The air was crisp, touched with the scent of fall leaves and distant wood smoke. Strings of Edison bulbs lit the cobblestone walkway outside the entrance. Jesse arrived just past 7, wearing a charcoal pea coat and carrying 2 cups of cider. I didn't know if you'd show, she said softly. I was hoping you'd ask. They walked Charlie, wheeling slowly beside him, her gloves soft against the chair's rims past the art installations. The rustic galleries filled with abstract canvases and sculptures made of twisted wire and reclaimed wood. She paused in front of a large canvas, deep blues and grays swirling around a stark streak of crimson. It looks like chaos, she murmured. Jesse stepped closer. Or transformation, depending on where you're standing. She looked up at him, her face quiet. They're coming for me, Jesse. Brent. The board. They're going to try and use you to take me down. I know. And you're still here. He turned to her fully. Charlie, I'm not here because it's easy. I'm here because I believe in what you're becoming. And because, somewhere in the middle of all this, between the stretches and the coffee and the silences, I started falling for you. Her heart caught in her throat. He continued, voice steady. If I had to choose between protecting my job or protecting your dignity, I'll choose you. Every time. She looked away, blinking fast. You shouldn't have to choose. I already did. A quiet settled over them, heavy and warm. Then she reached out slowly, unsure, her fingers brushing the back of his hand. Jessie didn't move. Charlie whispered, "This started as healing, but now it's more than that." He looked at her with the softest kind of intensity. "So let it be more." They stood in that gallery, the hum of distant jazz floating in from the corner cafe, the smell of cider lingering between them. Then, out of nowhere, a small voice cut through the air. "Daddy?" Charlie turned. A little girl stood at the edge of the gallery space, curly brown hair tucked beneath a knit beanie, cheeks flushed from the cold. Lucia. Jessie's entire face changed, softened, brightened. "Lucy," he said, kneeling as she ran to him. He caught her in a tight hug, lifting her slightly before setting her back down. Charlie watched them, her heart blooming in ways she hadn't expected. Lucia looked up at her with wide eyes. "You're the lady from the photo." Charlie blinked. "What photo?" "The one on Daddy's phone," she said proudly. He smiles when he looks at it. Jessie flushed. "Okay. Munchkin, maybe. Let's not share everything." Charlie laughed softly, then looked at Lucia. "It's nice to meet you," Lucia beamed. "Are you coming to dinner with us?" Jessie hesitated. Charlie glanced at him, then back at Lucia. "I wasn't planning to," she said. Lucia pouted. "But we're getting tacos." Charlie smiled. "Well, tacos do sound tempting." Jessie shrugged, playful. "She drives a hard bargain." Charlie looked down, her voice quiet. "Are you sure?" He met her gaze. "I want you to meet her, not as my patient, but as someone who might become part of our world." Charlie's breath caught. Then she nodded, and as they walked out together, Lucia skipping ahead, Jessie pushing the chair beside her, Charlie realized something she hadn't dared believe. She wasn't just learning to walk again. She was learning to live. And maybe, just maybe, to love again too. Dinner was served in a little brick-walled taco joint tucked between a record store and a bakery on Haywood Street. String lights hung loosely across the ceiling, casting a warm golden glow over chipped wooden tables. The place smelled like cumin and lime and something sizzling on a hot skillet. Charlie sat near the window, Jessie beside her, and Lucia across from them with a mountain of tortilla chips she was determined to finish on her own. "Don't judge me," Lucia warned, dipping another chip into the queso. "I didn't have a snack after school." "I wouldn't dream of judging you," Charlie said with a smile. "Though I might steal one if you're not careful." Lucia narrowed her eyes dramatically. "You're lucky I like you." Charlie laughed, leaning back a little, letting the moment settle around her. The buzz of conversation, the hum of the kitchen, the soft sound of Jessie's voice as he placed their order at the counter, it all felt oddly normal, a kind of normal she hadn't touched in a long time. When Jessie returned, he set 2 lime gelatos on the table and 1 sweet tea for Lucia. "I told them no onions on your tacos," he said to Charlie. She raised an eyebrow. "I never told you I hate onions." "You didn't have to," he said. "You flinch every time someone bites into one." Charlie blinked. "You notice that?" Jessie smiled. "I notice a lot." Her heart gave a quiet thump. She reached for her drink, taking a long sip to steady herself. As they waited for the food, Lucia leaned in, eyes curious. "So, do you like being a boss?" Charlie tilted her head. "You mean at work?" "Yeah. Daddy says you're the boss of a whole company. That's like..." 100 bosses. Charlie chuckled. It can be a lot sometimes, but I do like making things happen. Lucia thought for a second. Do people listen to you? Charlie's smile faded just slightly. Not always, but I've learned how to speak so they have to. Lucia nodded solemnly. Good. Because some people are rude and don't listen to girls. That happened to me in art class. Then they clearly didn't know who they were dealing with, Charlie said, offering a fist bump. Lucia grinned and bumped her back. The food arrived. Jessie slid her plate over gently, like he'd done this 100 times. Like this wasn't new. It felt like something that had always been. The three of them ate together, laughter weaving easily between bites and conversation. For a while, Charlie let herself drift just a woman, at a table, with a man and his daughter, in a city that had once felt so far from home. Later, Jessie walked them to her car. The air had cooled, but her cheeks were still warm. Lucia climbed into her booster seat, humming a Taylor Swift song softly. Charlie turned toward Jessie. Tonight was, I don't even know the word. Real, he said. She nodded. Yeah, that. I wanted you to see this part of my life, he said. Not just the part in the office, the work, the sweat, but this. She looked toward the car, at Lucia, now scribbling something in a notebook. You're an incredible dad, and you're not what they say about CEOs. Charlie smiled faintly. You mean cold, calculating, emotionally distant? He stepped closer. I mean guarded but kind. Brave in a way most people will never understand. And unexpectedly soft when it matters most. She swallowed hard. You're going to ruin me, Jessie Hall. He shook his head. No, Charlie. I'm just helping you find the pieces you thought were gone. She looked up at him, eyes gleaming, and then her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her coat pocket. A notification. Board meeting. Executive review moved up. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. She stared at the screen, the warmth of the night seeping out of her chest like a slow leak. Jessie saw her face change. What is it? They're accelerating the vote, she said. It's happening tomorrow morning. Charlie. They're scared. They want me out before I get stronger. Before I take back control. Then you walk into that room tomorrow exactly as you are, Jessie said firmly. You show them the fire they forgot you had. She looked at him. What if I lose everything? You won't, he said. Even if you walk out of that building without your title, you'll still have your strength, your vision, and me. She tried to smile, but it wobbled. He stepped closer. You've faced worse. She nodded, voice barely a whisper. But this feels personal. It is personal, he said, which is why they won't win. Charlie reached for his hand, squeezing it tight. Lucia rolled down the back window. Daddy, can we go now? I have math homework. Charlie laughed through her tears. Jessie leaned in close, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You've got this. Then he stepped away and climbed into the car. Charlie stood on the sidewalk, the breeze tugging at her coat. She watched the car pull away, taillights fading into the night, and for the first time in months, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would bring. Because no matter what happened in that boardroom, she wasn't alone anymore. The boardroom was already full when Charlie arrived. 12 faces turned toward her, some curious, some cold, others unreadable. Brent stood near the end of the polished walnut table, flipping through a neatly prepared binder, his expression unreadable, but smug at the edges. Charlie moved through the room without hesitation, her wheels gliding silently across the marble floor. She wore navy slacks, a crisp white blouse, and a tailored blazer that said, I came to fight without ever raising my voice. She rolled to her seat at the head of the table and calmly set her folder down. Let's begin, she said, her voice even. Brent cleared his throat. Before we start the official review, I'd like to bring forward a concern raised by multiple board members. Charlie said nothing. She waited. He clicked the remote, and a single slide appeared on the screen behind him. Exposure risk. Executive personnel relationship. Brent walked slowly as he spoke. Over the past few months, Miss Whitmore has been involved in a non-disclosed personal relationship with a staff member hired under atypical circumstances, a maintenance employee who later began serving in a private therapeutic capacity, unlicensed within company policy guidelines. Murmurs filled the room. Charlie's hands rested calmly on the table, fingers steepled. Brent continued. This relationship has progressed to a degree that raises questions about judgment, policy, and the vulnerability of this company's reputation. If this information were to reach the media, it won't, Charlie said, cutting through the air like a blade. Brent turned. Excuse me? Charlie's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It won't reach the media, because it's not scandalous. It's human, and you're framing of it as some sort of threat. That's the only unethical thing happening in this room. Brent laughed softly, incredulous. So you admit it? I admit nothing inappropriate has happened. I have pursued physical therapy in my own office on my time with someone who's certified to assist in mobility support. I have also grown close to that person. He has supported my recovery in ways none of you even bothered to ask about. She leaned forward slightly, eyes locking with every board member in turn. You've watched me return to this role after spinal trauma, after weeks in a hospital bed, after relearning how to sit, then how to dress myself, then how to show up to this job with dignity. And now that I'm starting to walk again, now that I'm reclaiming my role with fire in my chest, you want to make a man who brought hope into this building your scapegoat. No one spoke. So she kept going. Do you know what Jesse Hall gave me? Not romance, not affection, not favoritism. He gave me back my spine, literally and figuratively. He reminded me that leadership doesn't live in power suits or quarterly earnings. It lives in grit, in showing up when it's hard, in building a company culture that believes people are more than their titles. One of the board members, Linda Ramos, leaned in. And you're confident this relationship, if it continues, won't interfere with your judgment? Charlie met her eyes. I am, because my judgment's clearer now than it's ever been. Brent scoffed. So what are we supposed to just ignore policy violations? Did I violate a policy? Charlie asked, calm as ice. Or did I make a few men uncomfortable by refusing to break beneath the pressure of recovery? That landed like a gavel. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft click of someone adjusting their pen. Then, one of the older members, Arthur Green, cleared his throat. I move we proceed to the formal review, based on results, not rumor. Murmurs of agreement followed. Brent's jaw worked, his shoulders stiff. But the meeting rolled forward without him. Charlie delivered her quarterly presentation with grace and fire. Revenue up 17%. Expansion plans greenlit. Morale recovering. New retention programs in motion. Her voice never shook. Her slides were sharp. Her vision was bolder than ever. When she finished, the room was quiet again. And then applause. Not all, but enough. As the room emptied, Brent lingered near the door. You think this is over? He said under his breath. Charlie turned to him, her expression unshaken. No, Brent, she said. I think this is just beginning. But this time, I'm not dragging dead weight with me. She left before he could respond. Later that afternoon, Jesse was waiting in the rooftop garden behind her building. He stood near the stone railing, wind ruffling his jacket, eyes squinting toward the mountains in the distance. Charlie wheeled up behind him slowly. He turned, and his face broke into a smile. Well? She didn't say a word. Instead, she shifted forward, locked her wheels, and pulled herself upright using the rail. She stood, shaky, uneven, but on her own feet. Jesse's breath caught. Charlie looked at him, her voice a whisper. They didn't win. He stepped forward, gently holding her elbows to steady her. You walked in there like that? He asked. No, she said, but I walked out. They stood there, wind all around them, The sky cracked open in gold and blue. Jessie's hand found hers, and in the quiet, Charlie felt something deeper than victory. She felt whole. The next morning, the Asheville skyline stretched wide and golden beyond Charlie's penthouse windows, but she wasn't watching it. She was in the middle of her living room, standing with her hands lightly gripping the back of a sturdy chair, her legs trembling beneath her. Not because of weakness, but because she wasn't using the braces this time. She was trying, truly trying, to feel her legs bear her weight fully. Jesse sat nearby, quiet, his hands folded as he watched her in silence, not hovering, not interfering, just being present. One more breath, she whispered to herself. "You've got it," he said softly, voice like flannel, and Sunday Charlie exhaled and slowly sank back into her chair. Sweat beaded lightly on her forehead. She wiped it with a towel, breathing hard but smiling. "I can't believe I used to measure success by stock prices," she said between breaths. "Now it's 5 seconds on my own 2 feet. You've earned every second," Jesse replied. She glanced at him. "What happens now?" Jesse looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "With us," she said, her voice softening. "Now that the crisis is fading, the board didn't fire me. I'm not hiding our connection anymore. I'm not your patient now." Jesse leaned forward. "Charlie, you were never just a patient." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, neither of them blinked. "I've spent so long being the one with the answers," she admitted, "and now I'm standing here barely. Mind you, wondering if I'm brave enough to let someone love me like this." "Like what?" he asked, brow furrowing gently. "Unfinished. Healing, still figuring out how to balance ambition with vulnerability." Jesse stood and crossed the room. "Then let me be clear." He knelt beside her chair, his hand finding hers again. "I don't want a perfect woman. I don't want the CEO who conquers boardrooms or walks without wobbling. I want you, the woman who fought like hell to rebuild her life, the one who stayed kind when the world went cold, the one who gave me hope I didn't know I needed." Charlie blinked fast, her fingers tightening around his. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he said. "But you still showed up." Every time. They sat in the hush of the morning, city life moving distantly outside, their little world suspended in something still and fragile, but real. Charlie broke the silence. "Jesse, I want to see where this goes. Not with caution. Not with disclaimers. I want to try, even if I stumble." He leaned in. "Then let's stumble together." Just then, the front door clicked open. Lucia's voice floated in before her footsteps did. "Miss Charlie, Daddy said I could bring you your surprise." Charlie looked up, laughing gently. "Surprise?" Lucia appeared in the room with something wrapped in a brown paper bag. She held it out, beaming. "It's not food. I promise." Charlie took the bag and unfolded it slowly. Inside was a small watercolor painting, rough brushstrokes of a woman standing beside a man and a little girl. They stood under a giant cherry blossom tree, all holding hands. There was even a little wheelchair in the background. "You painted this?" Charlie asked, touched. Lucia nodded. "That's you standing. Because you will, all the time. And I wanted to be the first to paint it before it's real." Charlie felt a lump form in her throat. She turned to Jesse. "She's incredible. She's watching us," he said, gently. "So whatever we do, let's make sure we show her what strength and love really look like." Charlie nodded. She turned the painting over and saw 3 words scrawled in purple crayon. "My real family." Her breath hitched. She reached out, pulled Lucia close and held her tight. They stayed like that for a long time. 3 souls bound not by blood, but by choice. And healing. And something that felt an awful lot like destiny. Charlie had walked through boardrooms, operated companies, made fortunes. But this was her most terrifying, beautiful risk. And she wasn't taking it alone. The buzz of spring returned to Asheville early that year, and with it, the rhythm of life shifted. Mornings came with pink skies, warmer breezes, and the scent of honeysuckle drifting through the open windows of Charlie's penthouse. But this morning, her calendar was cleared. For once, there were no investor calls, no emergency board meetings, no endless slide decks to revise. Just a single note scribbled on a post-it from Jesse. "You've climbed the mountain. Now let's see the view." He picked her up just after 9 in his old Jeep, Lucia in the back seat, backpack in tow, a glittery butterfly hair clip bouncing in her curls. "Where are we going?" Charlie asked, her brow arched, though a soft smile already tugged at her lips. "You'll see," Jesse said, eyes on the road. "No suits allowed. Just trust." She did. An hour later, they were at Black Balsam Knob. Jessie had chosen it on purpose. The trail was relatively accessible for her new adaptive gear, specially designed crutches with shock-absorbent grips, and the lookout point offered one of the most breathtaking panoramic views in all of western North Carolina. It was Charlie's first real attempt at hiking since the accident. And it wasn't just about the mountain. It was about choosing to climb on her terms. Lucia danced ahead, a little blur of enthusiasm and energy. Jesse walked beside Charlie, offering his hand when needed, never pushing, just matching her pace. Each step was slow, focused, painful in ways that reminded her just how much she'd fought for this moment. About a quarter-mile in, Charlie stopped. Her breathing was shallow, sweat dotting her temples. The incline had steepened slightly, and the rocky path ahead was uneven. Jesse turned to her. "We can stop. No pressure." She looked up at the trail, then back at him. "I don't want to stop," she said, voice low. "But I don't know if I can finish." He stepped closer, gently touching her arm. "Then let's rest. And when you're ready, we take the next 10 feet." She exhaled, and they sat on a flat rock just off the trail. Lucia handed her a bottle of water like she'd trained for this moment. "You're doing amazing," she chirped. "Way better than Miss Howard from school." She got tired walking to her car. Charlie laughed, winded but grateful. "Thank you, sweet girl." Lucia wandered off to look at some wildflowers, and Charlie leaned back against the rock, eyes closed for a moment. "I used to think power meant never stopping," she said. Jesse tilted his head. "And now I think. Power is knowing when to pause, when to keep going, and when to lean on someone else." He looked at her with something deeper than admiration, something reverent. "You don't have to be the strong one every second, Charlie." "I know," she said. "But sometimes I still want to be." "You already are." A breeze lifted her hair, carrying with it the scent of pine and fresh earth. Then she stood. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't easy. But she stood. Jesse quickly rose beside her, a quiet smile growing on his face. "You ready?" he asked. Charlie looked up the trail again. "I'm not sure. But I want to see the view." And they climbed, step by step, slowly, carefully, over the next hour. The 3 of them inched their way upward. Other hikers passed them, some smiling, others offering quiet encouragement. No one rushed them. No one stared too long. At the summit, the earth gave way to sky. The world opened wide. Rolling mountains stretched endlessly in every direction. Waves of deep green and dusky blue. Clouds casting lazy shadows over the ridges. Wind whipped through their hair, cool and sharp and filled with something ancient. Charlie stood at the overlook, her hands gripping Jesse's. She was trembling, laughing, crying. Lucia ran ahead to the rocks and raised her arms like a tiny champion. "I told you she'd do it," she shouted into the wind. Charlie couldn't stop the tears. Jesse didn't try to stop them either. He let them come, his hand tightening around hers. "I'm not just walking again," she whispered. "I'm living again." "I know," he said. "And I'm so damn proud of you." They sat down on a boulder near the edge, watching the sky shift into softer hues. Lucia pulled out her sketchbook and started drawing the mountains with a stubby pink pencil. Charlie leaned against Jessie's shoulder. "Do you ever think," she said slowly, "that we had to break, to become who we were supposed to be?" Jessie rested his chin against the top of her head. "All the time." They stayed there until the sun dipped lower, until the air cooled again, until the world felt full of something too big to name. Charlie didn't say it out loud yet, but she felt it, clear and steady. This was home, not the penthouse, not the company, not even the polished title of CEO. Here, with them, that was the summit she'd been climbing toward all along. Rain swept through Asheville the next morning. Not a storm, just a quiet, steady drizzle that painted the windows with silver threads and made the whole city feel like it was wrapped in a wool blanket. Charlie sat at her kitchen island, wrapped in an oversized cardigan, sipping coffee as Jessie scrambled eggs behind her. The room was still, except for the soft hum of Lucia, singing to her tablet in the living room. It should have felt peaceful, but something in Charlie's chest fluttered too fast, too uncertain. Her phone buzzed. She hesitated, then flipped it over. A message from Linda Ramos, the board member who'd stood up for her 2 weeks ago. "Brent's back-channeling. Just got word he's pushing for a revised succession plan again. Thought you should know." Charlie stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone down like it had burned her fingers. She nodded once, then again, slower. "Yeah, just noise." He narrowed his eyes, wiping his hands on a towel. "You sure?" She hesitated. "No." Jessie came around the counter, leaning against it across from her. "Talk to me." Charlie looked at him, the words caught between pride and fear. "I thought I'd done it, that I'd won. But Brent, he's not letting go." Jessie didn't flinch. And I'm tired, Jessie. I'm tired of always having to prove I belong. Of having my every move watched, questioned, twisted." He leaned forward, his tone gentle. "You don't have to prove anything." She gave a weak smile. "Tell that to the corporate world." He reached for her hand, covering it with his. "Tell that to the woman who climbed a mountain on her own legs 3 days ago." Charlie swallowed hard. "I know you're scared," he continued, "but if you step back now, you're handing him everything you bled for." She looked down at her coffee, then back at him. "I'm not stepping back," she said softly. "I'm just figuring out what stepping forward looks like now." Lucia skipped into the kitchen, still singing. Charlie reached out, catching her gently by the waist. "Hey, kiddo. You think your daddy would survive if I took you away for a bit?" Lucia gasped dramatically. "Like a road trip?" "Sort of. I need to clear my head. And I thought maybe we could go stay at the lake house, just for a weekend." Jessie's brows rose. "The lake house?" Charlie nodded. "My parents left it to me. I haven't been there since." "Before the accident." Lucia spun in place. "Can I pack snacks?" "Snacks are mandatory," Charlie said. Jessie stepped closer. "You sure you want to go alone?" She looked at him. "Not alone. With Lucia. And I think I need this. To remember who I was, and who I still am." His expression softened. "Okay, but only if you promise to come back." Charlie leaned in, brushed a kiss against his cheek. "I always do." The lake house sat just outside Brevard, nestled between pines and fog, the lake stretching like a mirror behind it. When Charlie pulled into the gravel driveway, she took a deep breath. Lucia pressed her face to the window. It's like a fairy tale. It had once been her escape, a place her family went every summer when the world got too loud. And now, stepping over the threshold with Lucia bouncing behind her, Charlie realized how much she'd sealed this place away with her pain. But something shifted when she walked in. It didn't feel like a grave anymore. It felt like a door. They unpacked slowly, Lucia insisting on setting the table with mismatched napkins and plastic cups, while Charlie made grilled cheese and tomato soup in the old copper pot. Rain drummed gently on the roof. The fire crackled in the stone hearth. "Can we sleep in the loft?" Lucia asked after dinner, her eyes wide. Charlie looked up at the wooden ladder, leading to the tiny sleeping nook tucked above the kitchen. "I think that's the perfect idea." That night, under layers of quilts and fairy lights, Lucia fell asleep first, curled beside Charlie, her tiny hand tangled with hers. And that's when it came. The memory. A flash of who she used to be, running down the dock, diving into the water, pulling herself up onto the sun-warmed wood with legs that worked without question. Laughing. Unbroken. She swallowed the ache. But then another memory surfaced. The hospital bed. The silence. And Jessie's voice reading her newspaper headlines just to keep her grounded. "That means you still have a story to tell." Tears welled. She pressed a hand to her lips and exhaled. This was what healing looked like. Not polished, not clean, but real. She didn't need to be the woman from before. She just needed to be. Charlie reached for her phone, fingers trembling slightly, and opened a blank email. She typed a subject line before she could lose her nerve. To the board. My terms. She stared at it for a beat, then began to write. Not as a plea, not as defense. As a declaration. She was coming back. Not as defense. The morning of the board meeting, the sky over Asheville was wide and blue, like it had been scrubbed clean overnight. Crisp air drifted through the penthouse windows as Charlie stood at the mirror, adjusting the silk tie on her tailored slate-gray suit. It wasn't just a return. It was a statement. She could walk now, still wobbly, still slower than she once was, but she chose to wheel into the meeting that morning. Not because she had to, but because she wanted them to see every part of her journey, every step, every chair, every fight. This time, she wasn't hiding anything. Jessie leaned against the doorframe behind her, arms folded, watching. You look like yourself again, he said softly. Charlie turned to him, smoothing her blazer. No. I look like who I became, who I chose to be. Jessie nodded. And that woman is unstoppable. She smirked. Let's hope the board agrees. Lucia peeked her head around the corner. Can I give you something before you go? Charlie bent slightly as the girl ran in and pulled something from her pocket. A tiny beaded bracelet, bright blues and yellows with one word spelled in the middle. Strong. Lucia fastened it around her wrist like it was sacred. So you remember. Charlie felt her throat catch. She knelt and cupped Lucia's face. I'll never forget. The boardroom was already half full when she arrived, the long polished table gleaming beneath the morning light. Brent Caldwell stood at the far end, his expression unreadable. Linda Ramos gave Charlie a subtle nod as she entered, and several others offered warm, encouraging smiles. But she knew what this was. A test, not just of leadership, but of her vision, her integrity, her worth. Charlie wheeled to the head of the table, paused, and then slowly stood. Every eye in the room shifted. She braced herself lightly on the back of the chair, but stood tall. Thank you all for coming, she began, voice steady. There's been a lot of speculation, a lot of doubt, about my capacity, my leadership, and my future in this company. No one moved. But I'm not here today to defend my past. I'm here to define what's next. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, distributing crisp proposals down the table. This is not just a 5-year expansion plan. It's a cultural shift: employee equity programs, accessibility initiatives, family-first benefits. Because companies don't lead through brute force anymore. They lead through humanity. And that's exactly what nearly losing everything taught me. Brent cleared his throat. Charlie, with all due respect, this sounds more like an emotional appeal than a corporate strategy. She didn't flinch. You're right, she said. It is emotional, because businesses are built by people, and people deserve leaders who remember that. Silence followed. Heavy. Expectant. Then Linda leaned forward. I move we reinstate Charlie Perkins as CEO unconditionally. Another board member raised his hand. Seconded. One by one, hands went up around the table. Charlie stood there, stunned not because she hadn't hoped, but because for the first time, it wasn't her power that kept her here. It was her presence. Brent remained still, unmoved, but the vote passed. Unanimously. Charlie sat down slowly, the room buzzing with light conversation as the board shifted to the next agenda item. Her phone buzzed in her bag. A text from Jessie. "How's the view from the top?" She typed back. "Higher than I ever imagined." That evening, the celebration was quiet. No champagne, no fanfare. Just Charlie, Jessie, and Lucia back at the lake house, barefoot on the dock, the last light of day melting into the water. Charlie sat with her toes skimming the surface, her heels beside her. She hadn't worn them in over a year. "Think you'll ever go back to the city full-time?" Jessie asked, lying beside her, fingers laced behind his head. Charlie looked up at the stars, slowly blooming in the sky. "Maybe, but not all the way. I think I belong here just as much as I do there now." Lucia tossed a pebble into the lake. "I think we should all live here forever." Jessie chuckled. "You just want s'mores every night." Charlie leaned back on her elbows. "There are worse dreams." A long silence passed. Crickets began to sing in the distance. A pair of loons called from across the lake. Charlie turned toward Jessie. "Do you remember what you said to me the day we met?" He nodded. "I told you I'd help you walk." She smiled. "You did more than that. You helped me stand. Not just physically, but in my life, in myself." Jessie's gaze softened. "That wasn't just me. That was you deciding to believe again." Her eyes shimmered. "I didn't believe at first," she whispered. "But now I do. In love. In second chances. In family." Lucia crawled between them and wrapped an arm around each. "I believe in you too," she said sleepily, her head resting on Charlie's shoulder. The moon rose higher, casting a soft glow across the lake, and in that quiet, wrapped in warmth and new beginnings, Charlie realized something she'd never understood before. Sometimes life breaks you open not to end you, but to make room for something bigger, something true, something lasting. She looked at Jessie, then at Lucia, and felt it settle deep inside her. This was the story she was always meant to live. Not perfect, but real, and absolutely worth every step it took to get here.